Today's vehicle that we're working on is I believe it's a 2011 or 12 535 GT, and it is here from another shop. And their complaint is that when driving it, the low oil pressure light comes on and some drive malfunction lights come on, which we currently have on the dash being displayed. Get you a quick shot of some trouble codes. Show you what it's got. Okay, so in the DME there was several trouble codes. These are them. Get you a better shot. These are all DME codes. The one that I'm interested in, the one that's currently permanent, and it is an oil pressure control, pressure too low. And there is this other one, oil pump pressure too low. And then the other ones, I'm not going to worry about too much right now at this point, either because they're intermittent or, like particularly this Vanos codes, I'm not going to worry about that, being that Vanos is controlled by oil pressure. My main concern right now, this point in time, is to worry about the low oil pressure issue, if we currently do have low oil pressure, and start with that. Simply just want to go ahead and get a quick actual oil pressure measurement and see where it's at, and then from there I can go ahead and determine if it's a faulty pressure sensor, or there is actual low oil pressure, or something else. So I am actually going to use the scope. Got my 0 to 100 pressure transducer. That's what I'll be using. And I'm simply just going to let it run, and let it get warmed up and see where the pressure goes to. And kind of like I said, just kind of simply just start with taking an actual oil pressure reading and seeing if it's too low or not. So get you on that screen and we'll go ahead and start it up. Like I said, there's a couple error messages. Right now, for sure, we're definitely going to have one because of the oil pressure sensor. Factory one being unplugged. And I did have it running a little bit before I pulled it in, so it's a little warm. Actually, what we'll do is we'll actually go into the vehicle, pull up the coolant temperature, and that way we can compare at a decently warmed up engine what the oil pressure is and compare it to what BMW's spec is. Okay, so go into drive, we'll go DME, we'll look for live data. And one thing I did notice, it seems to be there we go again, almost like overcharging. Might want to look into that, but okay, so here's coolant. I'll just pull that up for now since we're just worried about temperature. So we'll let that run for a little bit. Actually, I'll bring this outside next to the scope. We'll let it run, let it get a little bit warmer than this, and compare where it's at. So right now it's kind of steady level, maybe around 15. And try to get a sort of okay, so yeah, about 15 and a half at idle, and we're about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm gonna let that run for a little while and get you back on the screen. Okay, so I let it run just a little bit longer, and we are now at just below 190, so we're getting pretty much there. And you could see where we were beforehand. It's gone lower than that. Let's see where we're at. So we are now at idle about 12.5 psi. I'll have to look up the spec from BMW as far as what they state for idle pressure. But at the warmed up engine for us right now, that's where we're at. It might dip down lower the longer I let it run, but I want to probably just get a spec right now and see which kind of direction we are going to go. Just for measurement wise, I want to get a reading of it revving up. So definitely climbs up. It definitely looks like it's shooting all the way up to the, if that's the peak of the scale, that's going to be right at about 100, which seems kind of high. Said I've not had to test one of these yet. They're not that common to come in here with low oil pressure lights, but let's see if we can get a sort of reading here at the top. So let me get my so yeah, it's pegging right right at about 100 at the snap throttle. So that does seem kind of high. I do have another N55 engine here, or vehicle with an N55 here. I might want to compare that if I have the time, but that's on the high side pressure wise. Idle, we are now at 11, so the warmer it gets, it keeps creeping down. Before I keep going any further down, let me gather some information as far as actual pressure and compare it to what we've got so far. Okay, so I went in to the office to check what the oil pressure should be according to BMW, and they say at idle you should have 1.5 bar, which equates to about 21 psi. We are already well below that, reaching about I think was 11 psi at idle. So we definitely have an actual physical low oil pressure problem. Looking into it, this is what's referred to as I don't know if you can see, there's a sticker down there. It's an N55 engine. That's a designation. The only thing that I'm concerned with, or was concerned with, was the fact that this was the first year that they started to add, as far as the inline sixes, kind of like a variable oil pressure control valve, and which is this guy here. Now this conveniently happens to be an N55 sitting here on the floor, as you can tell. So on these setups, you've got your pickup that sits in the oil pan. You've got your pump driven by the crankshaft, goes up a filter, and then throughout the engine. This here also comes into play with varying or controlling, helping the oil pump control the pressure. That was one thing that I was concerned with, that we might have issues with. But then I just happened to stumble upon, and this was an issue years ago, these oil filter caps. When doing oil changes, there is a center section that they have. Now, this is another example, but obviously with a broken cap. Here's your filter, but this here, it's actually there you go. This center section is supposed to be on the cap, clipped in on the cap. And years ago, when I was at the dealer, we were having, or randomly would have oil pressure situations, or even like Vanos issues, but there's an O-ring right there that if you're not aware of it, or you go aftermarket oil change place, they either won't replace it, and this one's actually, they harden up, which this one is stiff and hard, so they won't seal, they'll bleed off pressure, or they won't replace them. Or what I've come to see sometimes, this whole center section is not even put back. Which reminds me, I just did an oil filter housing gasket last night, and I had to buy the guy, well, I didn't have to buy it. I got him a new factory oil cap. This was the one, but you see the center section had come loose and stuck. That's the wrong filter. Where is it? This guy here. Okay. Number one, you can tell it's overdue on the oil change, but the whole center section came out and stuck on the oil filter. Like I said, sometimes people, if you're not fully aware, you'll take this out, throw the filter, and screw the cap back on the engine. Again, if that center section's not in, you're not having this O-ring seal occur, and you can have a pressure loss. So my first thing, and what I'm hoping is what's wrong with this car, is that we have something going on with that filter cap, because I don't want to have to mess with the variable valve solenoid control, or give this guy some bad news, possible engine issue, something crazy mechanical. So what I'm going to do, and there's a little bit of residue, and most of the time there's a cooler seal here, but it doesn't, that'll leak, and it'll leak residue there, or if the O-ring for this cap is leaking, or simply just from an oil change, excuse me, you'll have some residue there. So this one definitely doesn't look like it's leaking from the cooler seal. So I'm also kind of try to tie and hope that that's from a recent oil change, and that there is something going on there. So I'm gonna put you down somehow and get that cap off. When I do these, I like to try to keep pulling up, just because of the oil that builds up in there. And okay, let me get you. Obviously, there's no center section, and no center section in there. Aftermarket filter, most likely a recent oil change, like I said, and this will guarantee definitely give you low oil pressure, or oil pressure issues, as we're seeing. So first thing to do, I'm gonna go ahead and get another cap ordered, install it, and since I am still hooked up, I'm actually gonna go ahead and take a reading of a after shot, and kind of get an idea of a before and after, see what that does, or how that changes, being that we've got it recorded. I'm actually curious to see if that comes into play with the high reading, or what seems to be a high reading. Excuse me again. When doing like snap throttles, I've not had a chance to scope one, oil pressure, and see how high it gets. So it's a learning experience as far as gathering information on these engines and seeing what kind of oil pressures there are. Don't normally mess too much with diagnosing, messing around with oil pressures, but it's pretty cool to get an idea, and especially be even cooler, interesting to see what the pressure changes are with the wrong cap versus the right cap. So we'll go ahead and get one and get you guys back on here. Okay, so here's we'll do a side by side. That's the one we took off. And this is a brand new BMW piece. It comes with the new O-ring in the center section, and that's obviously clipped on already, so clearly see what the difference is. This one does not come with an O-ring here on the big section, so this guy still has it. So I'm going to swap this over real quick and then see what kind of pressures we got. Alright, actually decided to get a new factory filter O-ring and just go that way from the beginning. Particularly more for this guy. This comes with the, where is it? The small O-ring that we don't need, wherever it is. There it is. Okay. Alright, so let's get rid of this guy. Put him there. I'll dunk this one in here. Roll it around, get it lubed up. That's that. Lube that one up. And then okay. There we go. Try to clean a little bit of that off. Okay. Now, let me see if we can get this started. So we're not changing anything, just obviously the filter cap. Okay, so we are just a little bit over from what we were earlier and in temperature. And let's take a quick reading. We are above 20, so definitely. So if we go kind of average on these, so at idle, 27.5, already warmer than what we were earlier, which was down to about 11. So definitely what the problem was. No need to worry about messing with anything else on this. Just simply not pay attention when doing an oil change and throwing the filter away with the center section still in it. Keep that in mind if you guys get any of these BMWs with these oil filter caps, the same style, they all have that center section, whether it's a N52, 54, N20, N55. Just look for that when you pull that off, and if yours is there, if it's present, make sure you always change that O-ring, and that you make sure to replace the cap if the center section has unclipped. Yes, you could get away with clipping it back in, and you should be okay, but you know, if you'd rather be safe than sorry, you know, I always prefer to replace it with a new one. All depends, you know, if what your situation is, but the main thing is make sure the center section is there with a new O-ring, and that way you won't have any oil pressure problems like this guy did. So he'll be happy to hear and get his car back. Nothing crazy, nothing major, and that's about it on this one. So first time scoping the oil pressure on this. Actually, let's get a snap throttle. Let's see if these do make that high of a pressure. Like I said, I'm getting familiar with these engines and oil pressure and how they act. Okay. So it does shoot up all the way. So it does. This engine makes a decent amount of, or is able to make a decent amount of oil pressure. So. Well, that's it on this. Hope you like that. Quick, easy, simple, and we'll just move on to the next one from here.